Hello, Thaís Sky here. Welcome to Reclaim the Podcast. I am your host. I'm so happy to be here. If you're watching on YouTube, hi. And if you're listening to this podcast, thank you for being here. Today, I want to talk about the let them theory. It's Mel Robbins' book. It's gone viral. It's everywhere. And as I've been reading the book and thinking about the book, I have so many thoughts that I want to share with you on how maybe the book has some really important takeaways and also some limitations. And because Reclaim is a podcast where I help to break down popular pop psych concepts so that you can discern what's going to work for you, I figured it would be a good time to talk about this theory, a psychoanalytic or a more depth-oriented perspective of it, and maybe that will help you understand yourself and how to apply this theory in your life a little bit better. So let's get into it. If you're new here, I'm a licensed psychotherapist, but before I became a therapist, I was a life coach for over 10 years and a yoga teacher. I've come a long way and I've learned a lot in my journey of trying to understand the human experience and what is going to be most useful and helpful for us as we navigate the human experience. And I want to break down the let them theory because it really has taken the world by storm. And I see so many women gravitate towards this book. And I think it makes sense because a lot of women, particularly in Western countries, really identify as codependent, as sensitive, as an empath. And when we are struggling with our emotional landscape, when we struggle with how much we feel, part of what we struggle with is how much we feel for other people, how much we take on other people's emotional life. And so there's a way in which to gravitate towards something like let them gives us some type of permission that maybe we don't have to take on other people's emotional experiences. Maybe we can let people have their feelings and we can have our feelings. Right. So I think it resonates because it offers a sense of empowerment. It offers a kind of template for creating emotional boundaries. And it's a simple concept. It's simple, it's catchy, and the world loves it. However, I do think that there are some limitations to it. I think that there are some things that we are really depriving ourselves of bringing in a kind of additional richness to our life through this concept. And that's what I really want to talk about here today. I don't want to bash on Mel Robbins. I think that there's a lot of merit to this theory and I want to talk about those merits. But again, I would be remiss if I didn't add my voice to the narrative to talk a little bit more about the ways in which there are some serious limitations to this idea and how that could actually be exacerbating some of your pain. Before we get into it all, let's talk a little bit about who Mel Robbins even is. I did a little research on Mel because she's a very well-known now motivational speaker. She has a podcast host that gets millions of downloads. She's on TikTok and she's an author. She's written many books and she is really a figurehead in the self-help world. And so let's think about who is she? I learned that she was born in Kansas City, Missouri, and she grew up in Michigan. She got a bachelor's of art from Dartmouth College and a Juris Doctor. So she became a lawyer from Boston College Law School. And she began her career as a criminal defense attorney and then later served as a legal analyst for CNN. So she has always had, I think, a pull towards the public eye and wanting to do more than just her law practice. She wanted to be kind of known, right? So she gained widespread recognition in 2011 with her TED Talk, How to Stop Screwing Yourself Over, where she introduced the 5-second rule, a technique for overcoming hesitation by counting down from 5 to 1 and then taking immediate action. This concept became the foundation for her 2017 book, The 5-Second Rule. And in addition to her writing, she has her podcast, the Mel Robbins podcast. It has garnered significant acclaim and substantial following. And then her most recent book, The Let Them Theory, was published last year in 2024, and it encourages individuals to relinquish the need to control others' actions and focus on our own responses and well-being. And how wonderful is that? Robbins' approach combines personal anecdotes with straightforward advice, aiming to empower individuals to take control of their own lives through simple, actionable steps. And again, I think that's why Mel knows how to communicate to the public. She knows how to make her ideas catchy, make her ideas relevant, make her ideas easily digestible, which is, I think, a lot of how self-help helps, is that it's very easy to just think, let them. let them. And then it does something internally for us. It reminds us of like, oh, I am allowed to have emotional boundaries. Oh, I am allowed to be separate from other people. People can have their own experiences and I can have mine, right? And so the catchiness of her concepts, the quickness of her concepts, I think can make it easy to apply to a large audience. What I was struck though, when I read her bio, when I learned more about her, is that she doesn't have any type of psychology background. She hasn't studied psychology. She doesn't work with people on an individual level. I think a really tricky position that self-help often puts themselves in, the industry as a whole, because most people who teach and educate and offer ideas in the self-help industry come at it from their own experience, their own successes, and then they impart their wisdom onto the masses. And it really invites us to get a little curious of like, well, what made that person successful in the first place? And was it really these ideas? We have generally in our history have seen people who make a lot of money or who speak loudly and who speak confidently. We project onto them a level of competence and capability. And what I think we then miss in that is that some of these self-help concepts are actually not really that easily applicable, and it actually erases a lot of complexity. And so the self-help industry, is an industry that I've operated in for a long time. There's such a seductive narrative in it that you can become successful. Other people can help you become successful in really easy, digestible ways. And because they've done it and they are successful, we now have an opportunity to become successful by learning through those people. There's this kind of like mentorship model or this idealization model that is rampant in the self-help industry, and it works to sell books, but I don't think that it really works to change people. If it did, I don't think that we would have a need for psychotherapists, psychologists, psychiatrists. I think there is a massive gap between this popular industry with its popular ideas and its very seductive narratives, and then what actually changes people, what actually helps people. And because that discrepancy is not as easily recognized and seen, most people that go towards that self-help tend to find themselves actually not being very helped. So it's interesting, right, that Mel Robbins comes through her popularity, through her own successes in her degree, her success as a lawyer, and then because of that success now has this authority to tell you how you should live your life, and people listen. And it's very catchy. So what is the let them theory? So the gist of the book is that individuals are to release their need to control others' actions and instead focus on their own responses and their own well-being. At its heart, the theory comprises of two parts. There's the let them part, which allow others to be themselves, whether that means making mistakes, holding different opinions, or behaving in ways that you might not prefer. This relinquishment of control reduces personal stress, right? Fosters healthier relationships. That makes sense. When we are so bent on trying to control other people, well, we're now very stressed because there's very little control that we actually have over other people. And so the stress is that we're feeling quite helpless in that tension of wanting to control, wanting other people to experience things a certain way in order for us to be happy, and then feeling like we can't actually control. And now look at us. Now we're just stressed and anxious. And where does all that energy go? So that makes sense that when we can let people have their emotional life, then we create more space inside for us to choose something different or to have a healthier relationship. And then there's the let them, and then there's the let me. And the let me concentrates on your own actions and reactions. And by doing so, you reclaim your energy and focus on what you can control, leading to personal growth and resilience. Again, makes sense. We let people do what they want to do, and we focus instead on ourselves, our own reactions, our own experiences. What we're really talking about here is locus of control, right? Realizing what we can't control. We can't control the weather. And so stressing out about the weather is not going to help change the weather, and it's not going to do anything. Versus if we can focus on what we can control, maybe choosing better clothes that's going to fit the weather, then we are going to more likely create a kind of nice experience touring a new city, right? We can't control that it's going to rain all weekend. We can control bringing an umbrella. That locus of control, bringing that kind of sense of like, here's what I can do in this situation, can feel very empowering, and it can offer personal growth. Like, we're problem solving, we're figuring out our lives. It can feel very good to know, look, I brought an umbrella and now I'm not miserable out in the rain all weekend. This is great. So in her book, in her theory, this dual approach is designed to help individuals stop wasting energy on uncontrollable external factors and instead invest in their own development and peace of mind. I think, again, it really speaks to people who really struggle with interpersonal relationships, really struggle with feeling so impacted by other people's actions, people who feel very sensitive, very emotional. It really, I think, speaks to those individuals because we're so overwhelmed. We are at a loss of, how do I navigate this? How do I tell this person that they hurt my feelings? How do I communicate my emotional experience with somebody? When we're feeling so sensitive, we take things so personally, everything hurts so much. It makes sense that this would empower us to be like, okay, I can't control them. I can't control my boss's moods, but I can control how I respond to it and how I move about in my boss's, space. So Robbins' theory draws from a few kind of established psychological principles. 1, control and agency. Right? Recognizing that while we can't control others, we have full agency over our own choices. And this is so incredibly important. Wherever we are feeling so helpless, so despairing, so frustrated, we may be invited to wonder, where are we kind of trying to exert control over something that's actually not within our control? Yeah. Stress management. So understanding that attempts to control external factors often lead to increased stress and anxiety. That also makes sense. A lot of anxiety has to do with feeling like we have to control things that we just can't seem to find a way to control. And then it creates this tension inside of us. Like, I'm not supposed to be feeling sad, but I feel sad and I can't stop feeling sad and I need to stop feeling sad. And then there goes this anxiety. This is not okay. I can't feel this way. And authenticity. So it encourages individuals to live authentically by focusing on their values and responses rather than external validation. These concepts really align with practices in Stoicism, with cognitive behavioral therapy, and with mindfulness. These are all concepts that, if you're in the self-help world for any small number of books, you will have heard and read and taught. It's pervasive, right? This idea of focus on yourself, focus on your reaction. You can't change other people. Reframe, change your thoughts to change your life. And if we slow things down, if we incorporate some mindfulness into our experience, we create more change, or more space for change. It's important to mention that Mel Robbins has faced many allegations of plagiarism concerning the let them theory, with claims that she appropriated the concept from poet Cassie Phillips. And Cassie Phillips wrote a poem in 2019 called Let Them. And it received significant attention online in 2022. The poem really resonated with many people, leading to a widespread sharing. People got tattoos over it. It was like a really beautiful moment on the internet. And when in May of 2023, Mel Robbins released a TikTok introducing what she called the Let Them theory, claiming it was based on personal insight that she gained during her own experience of her son's prom's preparation. And she later kind of expanded that in the book. A lot of critics pointed out that the timeline is inconsistent, and that she could not have somehow appropriated from Cassie Phillips. And so I do want to give credit and recognition to Cassie Phillips' poem. So I want to read the poem to you all so that we can hold Cassie Phillips in mind as we're thinking about the let them theory. So the poem goes, just let them. If they want to choose something or someone over you, let them. If they want to go weeks without talking to you, let them. If they are okay with never seeing you, let them. If they are okay with always putting themselves first, let them. If they are showing you who they are and not what you perceived them to be, let them. If they want to follow the crowd, let them. If they want to judge or misunderstand you, let them. If they act like they can live without you, let them. If they want to walk out of your life and leave, hold the door open and let them. Let them lose you. You were never theirs because you were always your own. So let them. Let them show you who they truly are, not tell you. Let them prove how worthy they are of your time. Let them make the necessary steps to be a part of your life. Let them earn your forgiveness. Let them call you to talk about ordinary things. Let them take you out on a Thursday. Let them talk about anything and everything just because it's you they are talking to. Let them have a safe place in you. Let them see the heart in you that didn't harden. Let them love you. Cassie Phillips. So, this poem is a powerful reminder of prioritizing our well-being, allowing others the freedom to make the choices that they want, even if that means it goes against what you want for yourself and for them. It's a really beautiful poem. It's very evocative. It brings up certain feelings for me. It's interesting the kind of difference between one part of the poem and the other. The beginning feels like it's really coming out of a lot of anger. Just let them do it. If they don't want to love you, let them not love you, right? And then the other part of it lets us come into touch with and also let yourself, right? Let them love you. Let the good in too. And I really love that. I really love the juxtaposition between those parts of the poem. And it really, I think, invites us to think about how often we resist. We resist people's behaviors. We resist people showing us who they really are. We hope that we can change them. We hope that we can convince them. We hope that we can fight for them to change in some really significant way. And it's such a push-pull between the ways in which we want to advocate for ourselves and we want to maybe communicate our own desires, and how subtle sometimes that communication comes with wanting to really change them and wanting them to be so different in hopes that if they could be different, we could feel loved. And that tension is really poetically, I think, spoken of in this poem. So let's talk about the merits of the let them theory. Before we dig into the complexities and limitations, I really want to make sure we take some moments to honor what resonates and maybe give you some space for you to think about what part of the let them theory do you feel gravitated towards? What do you like about it? There's a reason why this idea went viral. So kind of one real big merit, right, is it offers a type of empowerment through separation. So let them promotes healthy boundary setting with self and other. It's something that many of us never learned how to do growing up. So from a psychoanalytic perspective, this echoes the idea of separation, individuation, right, from Margaret Mahler. So being able to let others act without fusing their behavior with your self-worth is a really important sign of a psychic development. It's a sign that we are growing, that we are developmentally expanding. When we can separate a person's behavior and action from our own identity and goodness. When somebody rejects you and it's not, I must then be a bad person, which is so many of us. We internalize their rejection as there's something wrong with me. I'm bad, I'm broken, I'm unlovable, because if I were lovable, this wouldn't happen. And it's a real kind of developmental milestone in our kind of psychic maturation when we can get to a point where it's a rejection and it hurts and it's painful, and maybe we touch on a sense of feeling like it must be us and we're bad, but we don't stay there, and we can move more and more quickly into a place of they made their decisions and they're allowed to make the decisions that's going to work for them, and maybe that has meant rejecting us, and it's painful and it hurts and it does not feel good, but maybe it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm an inherently terrible, awful, horrible person. That there can be a lot more nuance and complexity in this example for why someone would reject you. That's not just because you're a bad person, because you're bad, right? And so where we struggle with this is where something like therapy may be really supportive to help us get to that point. Because if we're finding ourselves really stuck in a chronic sense of people's behaviors are intricately tied to our self-worth, we're going to find ourselves chronically exhausted. And it makes a lot of sense that then if so much of other people's behavior is tied to our goodness, that then trying to control other people's behavior is a way that we're trying to stabilize our sense of self. The desire to control other people's behavior it becomes a psychic imperative to our stability and our well-being. So it's not even so much like, oh, I want to control someone else because I want to feel good. It's like, oh my God, I cannot experience rejection. I have to people please. I have to bend over backwards. I have to accommodate, because if I don't, my entire sense of self is going to destabilize and fall apart. Yeah. So this idea of creating separation between us and the other person through this idea of let them can really help people who find themselves overly enmeshed or codependent or anxiously attached, right? It introduces space, and in that space, it creates some freedom. So for an example is, finding yourself chasing a friend who's always canceling. That every time they cancel, you're the one. It's like, okay, let's reschedule. Okay, what about this time? Or what about this day? Or what about this time? And you're finding yourself doing that out of maybe a place where it feels like you're not really taking in, you're not really acknowledging the hurt in the rejection, in the cancellation, that you are disappointed. There's a way in which you're defending against the disappointment or the sadness by immediately moving into action, immediately moving into, let's figure out another time. And there's a difference between moving into let's figure out another time from a place of disappointment, of acknowledging that it hurt, but also recognizing that your friend has a newborn and that newborn right now is going to take precedence, and that you can be a little bit flexible because your children are older, and so you can be a little bit more accommodating while your friend is going through this particular time. But it still hurts. It's still disappointing. Maybe you name it, maybe you don't, but you are able to acknowledge it, right? There's a difference between that and then choosing to kind of still pursue them or still kind of chase them down versus feeling like you're doing it so that you don't feel the disappointment. Another example is like a partner who shuts down in a conflict, and every time you bring up something, your feeling, your disappointment, your frustration, they just shut down and say, I don't want to talk about this. If they're continually doing that, well, they're showing you something important about themselves, and you can let them show you who they are. And if the more that you can allow people to be who they are, the more you're going to get a sense of their priorities, of their capacities, of their capabilities, and then you can decide what to do with that information. And I think sometimes we really try to push forward, like insist, that people be a certain way, so that we don't actually have to face how they really are. And I think that's where the let them theory really thrives. It's like we have to let people be who they are in order for us to then know what to do about it. And if we're constantly bulldozing who they are, if we're constantly pushing, we may not then have a robust enough information about who they actually are versus are we relating to them in the fantasy of who we want them to be. This happens sometimes when we get into like a new friendship. We're so excited and we're actively pursuing the friendship and we're doing all this work and we're making the cookies and we're da-da-da-da-da. And then months go by and we realize that the friend hasn't been reciprocal, hasn't been showing any way of their kind of commitment or excitement to the friendship. And then we can start to feel really devastated, like were we bamboozled? And it's not that maybe we were bamboozled, but maybe that we were trying to force the relationship to be something that it's not by doing all of the effort in the relationship. How often does that happen? If we do all of the effort, if we do all of the changing, if we do all of the growing, then maybe we can compensate for the fact that our friend, our partner is not doing any of it. And so the let them theory introduces, this idea of like, we need to let people be who they are and show us who they are and meet them where they are rather than trying to force them to be something that they're not in hopes that will then kind of restore something within ourselves. Another merit of the let them theory is that it reduces unconscious fantasy and projection. So much suffering happens when we try to force other people into roles that they never agreed to play. And let them helps reality test a little bit. in the ways in which we people please, we're kind of fantasizing that people are participating in the game that we're playing, that we are developing a relational template for the relationship that they are going to agree to. And so in that way, we're trying to kind of force people into roles that maybe that they didn't agree to, that they didn't overtly say that they wanted to do. And so let them helps to maybe introduce a little bit of reality testing that you can accommodate, and you can be thoughtful and you can do these things, but to then expect other people to do it similarly just because you did it isn't very fair. And from a psychoanalytic perspective, we're talking the unconscious attempt to control others into behaving in ways that mirror our internal narratives. I talk more about projective identification in the video of 5 Ideas for a Better Life. So you can go check out that episode if you want to learn more about projective identification. So letting go of projection allows us to see people more clearly and then make more grounded choices. So if you're the one that's always doing all of the labor in a friendship, you're the one that's accommodating them, making the schedule, and they are not, right? Instead of anticipating and hoping that if you do all these things then they will do all these things back, what we can think about is you're doing all these things and how is that for you? You know, what you're doing there is maybe you're establishing the type of friendships that you want, where you are feeling good about the type of things that you're giving other people, that to give, to make care packages is your way of extending love, and you want to do that. That's different. It's different to do something out of your own generosity, out of your own care, than it is to do it with hopes that then it will be done back onto you. And so in the kind of let them theory, we're saying, okay, do what you want to do. Focus on what you want in your friendships. If you want more something in a relationship, the best way to do it is for you to offer it and for you to do it. But then see if you can notice how the other person responds and how they interact with what you're giving them as information, as something that you can then choose to make more grounded decisions out of. So instead of trying to make someone love you the way that your parents never could, let them be who they are, you know, and let yourself grieve what they're not. Now, this is a really a tiny example, but it's really at the core of so much of couples work, is the way in which we hope that our partner will love us in a way that our parents never did, and hoping that this time we'll get this kind of unconditionality, that they should be able to hold us and be endlessly patient with us, et cetera, et cetera. And when they're not, we get really devastated because on some levels we're operating out of a transference where we're hoping that our partners are going to give us what we didn't get then. And we're preventing ourselves then from grieving what we didn't get and what we can't ever now get, because we can't ever now get the kind of unconditional love of a parent. We can get it, different forms of love in different ways that can be even more gratifying, but we can't get that as adults. Yeah. And so, you know, again, it's this idea of a lot of our suffering comes from wanting other people to give us to be a certain way in order for us to be happy. And the let them theory tries to bring a little bit more separation in there. Another merit to the let them theory is it kind of helps to interrupt compulsive fixing and people pleasing. So many people carry an unconscious belief that their safety depends on managing other people's reactions, and let them invites a disruption to this. It's so real that when we feel that if other people are disappointed, if other people are sad, if other people are mad or frustrated, if they're experiencing any of these feelings, it means that we're failing them. It means that we're not a good friend. It means that we're not doing good enough job of managing their emotions. In some ways, we then have learned somewhere along the way that was our responsibility, that we were responsible for making sure that our caregiver, our parents, our mother did not experience frustration and sadness. We took that on as our responsibility. And now it happens all the time where we feel so deeply responsible for people's feelings. We feel like it's on us to fix, to resolve, to do something about. And the kind of psychological underpinning of this idea is Winnicott's false self, right? A way in which we develop a sense of self that is not really true to us, but was built to try to maintain the caregiver's approval. We've morphed and conformed ourselves to be how we think our parents wanted us to be. And so letting others be themselves may be a first step towards not over adapting. When we are overly adapting, we are losing something of ourselves when we do that. When we are operating out of this false self, out of this desire to get approval first and then seen and recognition second, what we're really doing there is we're hoping like if we please them and if they approve of us, then they'll give us the recognition that we want. Then they'll give us the love and attention that we want. When we operate in this way, we're actually diminishing the possibility of us getting what we really want. There's like a manipulative quality to it. Oh, if I can be easygoing. This is a big one, right? In a friend group. If I can just be easygoing, if I can just go with the flow, then everyone will be happy with me and then everyone will want to spend time with me. Yes? And so then we go, but we're resenting and we're upset and we didn't really want to go to this place, or we have allergies and the friend group isn't considering that. And we have this fantasy, well, if I'm accommodating, then they'll be accommodating to me. If I'm easygoing, then they're going to be easygoing to me. But what we're doing there is we're creating a psychological contract that other people aren't agreeing to. No one is agreeing to if you are accommodating, they then now have to be accommodating. Unless that's spoken and verbally agreed on, they're not consenting to this agreement that we have made on their behalf. And so then when they're not considerate of us, when they're not thinking about us the way we are thinking about them, then we feel devastated. Wait a minute. I was doing this because I had thought if I was accommodating, it would be accommodating. So why isn't that happening? And it's because they may not see it as accommodating, or they're not recognizing all that you're doing because it's so subtle. There's we can't assume that people see what we do because we see it so clearly. And so the let them theory helps to disrupt some of this. It could be like, a kind of ego strengthening intervention, especially for women and fawners who chronically abandon themselves to maintain harmony. It's this idea of let them have their sad feelings. Let them be frustrated. People are allowed to be frustrated. People are allowed to have the whole slew of emotional experiences. Let them do it. Let them be hurt. Let them be upset. It's okay for people to have emotions. It's okay for people to be sad. It's not something that we have to fix. And in fact, not only is it not something that we have to fix, but letting people have the full landscape of their emotional experience actually can foster intimacy and connection. Because when people are allowed to feel sad, they can work through it with us. They can experience something different with us. It can be really magical. It can be really meaningful to the relationship. People don't like feeling fixed. They don't like feeling managed. It's not a good feeling. There's a sliminess to it. And let them theory really speaks to this really poignantly. So if you spent your entire life, right, trying to be palatable so that people don't leave, let them gives you this kind of permission to stop contorting, to just be yourself, to have needs, to say, hey, that's not a good brunch spot for me. Let people then be a little inconvenienced by it. It's okay for people to have their feelings. You don't have to take it on as yours and then try to fix it. The final kind of most important, I think, takeaway of the let them theory that I think is really helpful is that let them helps reorient people towards their own side of the street, right? In a world where early attachment may have taught us to vigilantly monitor others to feel safe, recentering the self can feel liberating. It reduces anxiety rooted in this illusion of control. It can be really powerful. And so letting them behave in however way, the idea of just let people be who they want to be letting them doesn't mean that you don't care. It means that you're not confusing control with connection. Right? So I'm going to let them be who they are so that there is actually a more increased capacity for connection. Esther Perel talks a lot about this in her book, Mating in Captivity. So much of what fosters intimacy is difference, is allowing people to be individuals within a coupling. And so if we're trying to be the same, if we're trying to be so accommodating and invisible in order to make other people happy, we're actually depriving ourselves of the intimacy that can only be possible through separateness, through being separate people people with separate needs. And having separate needs means inherently letting go of other people's experience or feeling around us as something that we have to control and we have to monitor. So yes, let them can be a very liberating invitation to stop over-functioning, to reclaim space, to observe without absorbing, right? It really, again, it speaks so deeply to the empaths, the hypersensitive, the ways in which we take things so personally. It can be so painful. It really gives us so much important permissions. But what happens when we use that same idea of let them to bypass pain, to numb out, or to pretend that we don't care? That's where we're going next. Let's talk about the limits of the let them theory. So number one, it can be a defense that's disguised as empowerment. On the surface, let them reads as a boundary setting tool, but psychoanalytically, it can sometimes serve as a defense against need, vulnerability, or grief. Right? It may reflect a type of reaction formation, acting as though one is indifferent or detached while unconsciously feeling deeply invested, hurt, or afraid. So, for example, a person says, let them ignore me. I don't care. Let them. Let them, right? But underneath is longing, is anxiety, or terror of abandonment. We're using let them as a defense against the complexity of our pain. This happens all of the time in self-help. We use these concepts it attaches as a justification for why we should distance ourselves from the pain of relating, of being connected to people. Let them, let them treat me like shit. I don't care, and it's like, why wouldn't you care? Of course you would care. It doesn't feel good when people don't treat you well. We're confusing let them with some sort of defense against our own pain. And that is not going to be ultimately helpful because we are then just distancing ourselves from our own experience. We're creating a rift in ourselves rather than what we think we're doing, which is to kind of unhook ourselves from the pain of the other person's disappointing behavior. Let them makes us think that, what we're doing is empowering when really what we're doing is masking our pain. And that just does not ultimately serve us. And it's then much harder for us to work through because now we have a concept out in the world that we can latch onto and justify why we should try to be indifferent and try not to care when we actually do care. Let them is not supposed to be a way in which we try not to care, right? It's a way in which we're trying to understand why we care and what is happening in those moments when we are caring. So the shift from control to avoidance is not the same as emotional processing. Without integrating the underlying affect, the letting them is more of a shutdown than a release. It misses the point. We're using it to avoid what we're feeling. And this happens all the time, where we're using this concept to justify why how we're feeling is actually wrong. Someone communicates to us that we hurt them, and we go, let them be hurt. That's not my responsibility. And now what we're doing there is we're shirking off the interrelational accountability that person is proposing, is offering. So saying, let them be hurt, that's not on me, is really, it's an immature response to the possibility that we are actually feeling so fragile. We're feeling so much shame that we hurt the other person. And so we go to let them be hurt as a way to defend against our own vulnerability. And it's quite damaging to the relationship that if somebody is kind of brave enough or kind of communicating that you've hurt them, that the opportunity is for us to meet them in that hurt, to be able to acknowledge, oh my gosh, I hurt you. So rather than let them ignore me, I don't care. What if you did let them ignore me because they are ignoring me? There's no letting. You don't have to let. They are ignoring me, and it hurts my feelings. And I don't know what to do about it yet, but I'm going to let myself That's where the let it should be, really. I'm going to let myself feel something. If I could write a book about the let them theory, it would be the let me theory. Let me have my feelings. Let me have it all. Let me feel sad. Let me feel give myself permission to feel all that I can feel. Because I think this is the next point here about the limitations of let them, is it confuses this omnipotent quality, omnipotent control, just in the reverse. So the let them implies that you could at some point control. The words, the language matters. When I say something like, let them go in the tub, I am suggesting and implying that I could have stopped them from going into the tub. And when it's with, children, a lot of let them applies. Let them go. Let them run around. I could stop that. I could stop them from doing that, but I'm choosing not to stop them from doing that. Language matters, right? So when we use the language let them, we are inherently suggesting that we could have had control over someone's experience, and we're opting out of that control. And that is a massive misunderstanding of a really critical component of relating, which is, sure, you have control over whether your children run around and go into the tub. You could stop them, but you do not have control of their emotional experience. So let them cry suggests that you could stop their crying. And of course, we can interfere, we can influence, we can impact, but we ultimately cannot force someone to stop or start a feeling. And with let them, it confuses that a bit because it really does suggest and imply, even as it's saying, you don't have control of other people. Subtly, it's saying you do have control. You just now have to let go of that control. Let them have their emotional experience. Allow them the privilege, and that's inaccurate. You do not have it. You do not have that control. We may fool ourselves into thinking we have that control. We may fool ourselves and really grapple with our omnipotence, especially if we really struggled with this as children. If we thought and were taught or kind of related to in a way that suggested that we had omnipotent control over our parents' feelings and that were our responsibility. We're now going to be very confused about what power and control we do have now as adults. We're going to carry with us this omnipotent wish that we can control people's feelings. And with let them, instead of addressing the underlying kind of anxieties and underlying developmental difficulties around omnipotence and grappling with our own helplessness, we're just turning it on its head. We're just saying, well, you've struggled to allow people to feel a certain way. Now let go of your control of it, but you do have control of it, but you're choosing to let it go of it rather than really grappling with your sense of control and authority and omnipotent wish. And I think that is the biggest miss in the let them theory. And it really keeps us defended against our difficult grapplings that are really important to healthy relating. Boundaries, emotional regulation come out of really understanding and working through our own emotional landscape rather than thinking that we are actually doing a good thing for people by letting them have their emotional experience. That's, again, suggests and implies that we have authority and power over their emotional experience. Of course, I can't go far into an episode without talking about the worthiness wound. So let them theory does kind of run the risk of reenacting the worthiness wound, because if your core wound is that your needs were too much or your feelings were met with withdrawal, let them be maybe another way to abandon yourself, this time under the guise of growth. So instead of tolerating the vulnerability of saying, I need something from you, you may think and say, never mind, I'll let you. Never mind, I'll let you not meet my needs. I'll let you be who you are. And that is someone who doesn't meet my needs. And in that way, again, we're disengaging, we're avoiding, we're withdrawing from the difficult and beautiful dance of relating interpersonally, of being in relationship with people. In a way, psychoanalytically, what we're talking about here is like a repetition compulsion, right? A way of recreating the early attachment dynamic where your needs went unmet and you coped by minimizing or cutting them off. And so now you're doing the same thing, and letting them can feel then self-protective, right? But if it reinforces the belief that your needs are unacceptable, then that's not really healing. That's a reenactment. You're recreating it. And so you're essentially, there's a confusion about your power, about your control, your authority. When we say, well, let them show you who they are, we are in some ways also implying a suggestion that the relationship cannot influence people, can't impact people. We're using let them to try to absolve ourselves from the responsibility of naming and speaking to our experience. And there is a massive difference. If our friend hurt us, there's a difference between saying, let them not care about us, which implies that their behavior comes out of for them of not caring. We don't know that. Maybe they were just busy. We don't know where it's coming from if we don't engage in it. And so we're saying, I'll let them not care. I'm just going to use this as information and not invest in the relationship. We're making assumptions and we're not discussing them with them. We're drawing conclusions based on their behavior, based on our own interpretation, right? That transference of our past. And then we're assuming that that's what's happening. And then we're going off of that rather than engaging in the conversation of hey, that hurt my feelings. What's that about? What's going on for us? And then understanding, and maybe nothing will change. Maybe they can't give you more of their time, or they can't give you more, of whatever it is that you're looking for. But at least the disappointment and the frustration can be held in the relationship, rather than it just being, well, let them mistreat me, and I'm just going to disengage from the relationship. There's such a difficult complexity to relationships where we feel disrespected, we feel like people are being mean, being rude, but they may not experience it that way, or they may not understand that is how you're experiencing it, and you're assuming that they know that when somebody does this, you experience it as disrespect, and that's unacceptable to you, and you're not going to engage in it anymore. But to them, for their family, their culture, it may not be disrespect. And without talking about it, we're missing an opportunity for them to learn about you. And if they now learn something about you, if they learn that this is disrespectful for you, and they keep doing it, and they're not showing that they're really engaging in it with you, then that is information. And then there are decisions to be made. But we're so quick to cut off relationships. We're so quick to cut off our care. And I get it. It hurts. It hurts to care. And so we use let them to be I don't care. But it doesn't work that way. And we're missing out an opportunity in enriching our relationships by trying to bring language to our care and see how it can be held in the relationship. And then the kind of final, I think, real miss of the let them theory is it's a premature closure, right? So in psychoanalysis, we don't rush to closure. We make space for contradiction, ambivalence, and mourning. That is psychoanalytic psychotherapy in a nutshell, right? We're here to make space for, rather than close it, rather than be that is what it is. Now we don't have to think about it anymore. And I think let them often short circuits a meaningful process of confrontation, clarification, and repair. We are depriving ourselves of so many opportunities of repair if we're not talking about what's being missed, what's being misunderstood. And so insecure attachment systems, especially avoidant, may use pseudo-independence to avoid the pain, right, of unmet needs. And letting them becomes an internal kind of firewall against further disappointment, but also against intimacy. So it's the same women, right, generally, who tend to struggle with codependency. They also often struggle with hyper-independence of, I don't need other people. And we often then will find ourselves using let them as a way to try to justify our hyper-independence and why we can't trust people and we can't engage in the process of talking about needs. But we're missing a whole lot. This is the core of my podcast, to kind of disseminate some pop psych ideas to help get to a deeper root, to think more deeply about things. And pop psych often misses out on a lot of complexity. It tends to prioritize clarity, action steps, and resolution. But the human psyche psyche is full of contradictions, love and hate, desire and fear, dependence and autonomy. Let them really flattens these tensions by suggesting that there's always virtue in disengagement. And that is just, it's a real missed opportunity to deepen our capacity for intimacy and connection. And, psychoanalytically, growth often lies in discomfort, not the exit. And in therapy, we may stay in a feeling or a dynamic longer than what we feel necessarily comfortable, not to suffer, but to understand what is going on. And we want to be careful not to use let them as an excuse for why to just exit, to just leave, to just discard the feeling and move on. We're missing a lot when we do that. Another kind of thing that pop psych often misses is the relational field entirely. It assumes we're reacting to the present, but often we're reacting to someone from the past showing up in the present. If your boss, friend, or partner triggers early maternal or paternal wounds, the real question is, should I let them? That's not the real question, but who do they represent to me? Who are they to me? And how is my past maybe playing out here? And let them doesn't ask who you're really talking to in those moments. It keeps the dynamics in the surface, prevents us from developing a little bit of a deeper understanding of ourselves and an opportunity to change some of these early patterns that are now deeply entrenched in our relationships. And of course, the kind of biggest one that I know that I've been saying is that it leaves no space for ambivalence. In real relationships, we love and resent. We admire and envy. We want closeness and we fear engulfment. And let them bypass so much of the messy middle in favor of clean boundaries. But healing often requires us to sit with the split until integration becomes possible. I would be doing you a disservice in some ways by not speaking to the fact that boundaries can often feel clear but dismissive of the complexity of a relationship. And I know that we're so in favor of boundaries because I think there's something so nice about it being clean, but we're depriving ourselves of so much if we just kind of work on letting ourselves stay in the middle a bit until integration or a more deeper understanding becomes available. So how can we go deeper with the let them theory? I think one of the ways in which we can do this is by asking ourselves, what am I protecting myself from? So behind let them is often a fear of being needy, of being rejected, of being angry. And so instead of rushing to detachment, can we explore this? What feeling am I avoiding by trying to let go here, right? Or by letting them? What may I be avoiding? Yeah. So we're trying to get a little bit deeper. We're using the let them theory to go deeper into ourselves. So when we're noticing ourselves wanting to say, let them, what may be happening? What feeling we may be trying to avoid there? Honoring the grief, the grief of realizing that someone cannot give you what you have hoped is profound, and it creates then space for the relationship to nourish in maybe a different way. So rather than saying, let them disappoint you, can we say, grieve what you won't get and then decide from there? This is what allows for a clarity that's rooted in a reality, not a defense. If your friendship has shifted and changed to the point where it's so disappointing, can you be with the grief of the change, grieving that what you once got in this relationship, you're not getting anymore? And then you can decide how you want to move from there, rather than just being, let them disappoint you, let them hurt you, let them, it doesn't matter. I'm going to disengage. Let them, and this is particularly true in the reverse, when people are communicating their disappointment with you. We think that we're doing a service to them of letting them feel the feeling, let them be disappointed in me. But then we're missing contact with the other person, that maybe there's something that we can learn about ourselves, that we can grow or stretch, or maybe we don't even change, but can we just sit with people being disappointed in us? We're not going to fall apart. It's not going to destroy. We can survive people feeling disappointed. And it goes back to this idea of it doesn't mean that you are a disappointment when people are disappointed. And wherever that feels hard to separate, that's where some of the work lies. And then finally, differentiate detachment from indifference. Letting go is different than shutting down. In psychoanalytic work, it helps us to stay in relationship to the feeling, even when we choose to step back from the person. So I'm still hurt. I still wish things were different, but I know I can't force that change. So I'm choosing to care for myself without pretending that this didn't matter. It's such a more richer declaration for ourselves than I don't care, or I'm not going to feel hurt because fuck them, or however way we try to kind of defend, right? So there's a difference between detachment out of an avoidance and a punishment, and a way in which we can say to ourselves, like, this is no longer going to work for me. And it's really disappointing. I'm really hurt by it. But I think this is the best thing that I need for me right now. And that can be a really powerful declaration to ourselves and others. Okay, so we've come to the end of the episode. I really look forward to hearing your thoughts on the let them theory and my take on it. What do you think? Let me know. Leave a comment. Come join me on Instagram at I am Thaís Sky. And if you want to go a little bit more deeply into some of the psychoanalytic concepts that I introduced here today, I have a podcast called 5 Important Concepts for a Better Life. And you can check out some of really grounded and practical psychoanalytic ideas of how to help you think more deeply about your life so that you can find more joy and more intimacy. So go check it out, and I'll catch you next time.